peaceful stuff like that.
Pardon? Okay, good evening all. Thank you. Talking so nice among each other and you're so happy, and then I say good evening, then you're there. But that's okay, that's okay. It's so nice, good evening. It's so nice to see all that nice reunion that went on just now. Y'all would not have seen each other for a couple of months, I understand. And so it's nice to see each other. Let me first start off by saying I'm Stephen Thompson, and my task is easy. My task is to get you to the finish line in one piece.
Thank you, thank you.
And you will, if you want to. Let me say also that, how many of you would have sat with me before in any class? Okay.
Decent people.
Okay, let me say that for those who do not know, I am going to try my best with you. I am going to do the very best I can to share as much information I can with you. I will try my best to prepare you as best as possible, and then we leave the rest up to,
Thank you, Jesus.
in the name of the
The
Father,
Father,
and so forth. Let me also say though, let me congratulate you for having made it this far. I don't take this lightly. Thank you very much. In fact, I was about to say that. Preempt me, but let me say that you would have started this stuff months ago, many months ago, and I know for you, for some of you, it might even feel like years ago. You started off and you hear this thing about AML and CFT and CDD and KYC and FATF and CFATF and who else? OECD and
FATF and IMF, all the letters that are
all of these kind of things make you feel like you're back in kindergarten again, right? But let me say to you, it's going to be all right. Within the next coming weeks, I'm going to try my best to help us to make sense of the whole thing. You would have had Mrs. Archer would have started you off some months ago. Then I think you would have had Mrs. Nottage, and then you would have had Mr. Randy Taylor, and then you would have had Miss Tiffany Bullard.
Stop at Randy Taylor. Stop to Randy.
Stop to Randy Taylor?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so he
Miss
did,
Nottage,
who did
yeah.
governance and...
Him. He carried us the rest of the week.
Archer,
Okay.
Nottage, and
Okay.
Mr. Taylor.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So, you're going to have me for the rest of the journey.
All
You're
right.
going to have me for the rest of the journey. And let me say to you, allow me please to reiterate, I'm going to do my best to get you through this. We're going to be all right. We're going to be all right. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Okay, the next thing I want to say to you is, on a very serious note, I would have passed over something just now that I usually call nuggets. Those who would have sat with me before will know that for each of the units that I would have done, I would have done what I call nuggets. Meaning that big binder. You can't carry that big binder everywhere you go. You don't want to carry it in church. You don't want to carry it when you get up with your friends because they can think you're crazy. You don't want to carry it anywhere. But when you have something like this, just several pages, you can keep it in the car with you.
That's right.
Anybody been in traffic today?
Listen.
I said to somebody today, they must have, in addition to the parents, I think they gave all the students cars too. Because I mean, it's just crazy out there. So while you're stuck in traffic, pick this up and just flip through it. I try to highlight as many of the salient points as possible. Nuggets, you don't have time for the whole chicken, so you go to that place and you get
some nuggets.
Some nuggets. That's what this here is all about. Now, I've always been asked, how come I don't do nuggets for the whole...
I was going to ask where the rest of the nuggets.
You
Y'all want the whole chicken? Y'all want the chicken?
I do not want to offend my colleagues. They have their own style. I have mine. Mine is to give you nuggets and to go through the stuff and to say to you, we're going to talk through this. you're going to get through this because we're going to make this as practical as possible. I would have heard, I was in the eavesdropping, but I heard some of the comments.
Some people would
And I
drive
said,
to
Lord, it
drink.
kind of reminds me of what occurred several years ago with myself. The truth about it is, and I wish I had known then what I know now, and that is that if you take this entire booklet, your entire folder, and try to make it as practical as possible, put it in real life situations, it will be easier to digest, it will be easier to understand, and guess what? Whether you come out with a distinction or that other thing, but you're going to have distinction. Those other people who would have gotten other stuff, they really, really wouldn't remember any of it. And the truth about it is some persons use it as a stepping stone to promotion, or some people are here, don't put up your hands, some people are here because their employer sent them here and paid for the stuff, and so they're here. But when you put your hand in your pocket or purse or bag and pay for this yourself, excuse me, you would want to be successful, and you will be successful. But to be successful, it has to make sense. It has to make sense. I mean, the truth about it is, this stuff was written by some people on the other side of the world who don't know anything about what happens on this side of the world. And their whole life is over there.
Yes, sir.
And so, pardon me by opening with these few points to you. Everything that you read, everything that you write back to them, you would want to do it in the European context. That's first and foremost. Unfortunately, we live so close to that other group of people right up the road there that we think in the U.S. context. But you must recognize that you need to give them answers in the U.K. context. When I did this some years back, I was a regulator at that point. I served at the Compliance Commission as inspector there for 13 years, but while I was there, I wrote this exam. First of all, I wrote the assignment, and then I wrote it from a regulator's perspective. And some of the comments, good thing those people don't live over here, because I would have gone looking for some of them. They really did not have an appreciation for the local context. But I learned from that. And I recognized that, you know what? Give these people what they want to hear. Give them what they want to read. And you pass it, you get, but while you are learning the stuff, you put it in the local context. This is where you live. And so you are going to have to keep it in the local context. But think broadly when you are writing to them. Think about it now. When you're writing to these folks, you're writing to people who don't understand anything about what happens here. One of them might have been on this side of the world one time.
On vacation.
On vacation. On the ship and didn't even come.
Fish fry.
Fish fry.
You don't even know what down.
But they do not understand the context here. In fact, the truth about it, and I say this in a respectful manner because it's true, some of those persons there, they just think we're a bunch of criminals on this side of the world. And so when you write and you talk about having, good AML regime, what do they say?
Which one know what that is?
There's also set that up. And by way of a bit of background, while I serve at the Compliance Commission, and I'm only going to say this for a couple of seconds and then I move away, I don't talk about myself. But while I was serving at the Compliance Commission, I had the great fortune of working with the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, representing the Bahamas throughout the Caribbean, going to FATF meetings, Financial Action Task Force. So a lot of this stuff that you see in the book here, a lot of the stuff that came about here, I was at the table with a few other Bahamians. A few of us were at the table when they were discussing this stuff. And so while they were discussing this stuff, I put up my hand several times to press the mic and say, I want to say something. And I told them, these standards that you are setting up, we comply with these more than any of you think.
Correct. How?
the room went quiet.
That's right.
First of all, they tried to figure out all of those were of that other pigmentation. First thing they tried to figure
They just passed spot.
First one who let this little black boy in there. But my point is, I saw when this whole thing was coming together, by way of background, and you know this, well, let me make another point. I also had the great fortune of being a part of 3 mutual evaluation assessment teams. Trinidad and Tobago, Turks and Caicos Islands, and St. Martin. And so I understand, you know it is to go and examine a country's AML regime, you have to know what you're doing. Because them people, they're not easy. Trinidad and Tobago, those folks were ready to kill because they thought they had everything right. My point in saying that is, this stuff here is some real stuff. This is not theory. This is stuff that people live by every day. The FATF say either you meet the standard or you do not meet the standard. There's no middle ground there. There was a time when this whole thing started out, and the Financial Action Task Force set up what they called recommendations. And I sometimes, you know, it's so strange to hear the word recommendation from the Financial Action Task Force. These are the strongest nations in the world. And they put something on paper and call them recommendations. If you were to say to me that you recommend something to me, doesn't it sound like I have a choice? I have an option,
I recommend.
right? But no, they set up these recommendations for the global financial services sector, and then they say, comply, or we will kill you. We will shut you down. So are they really recommendations?
No.
Let's move forward. No, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. They're the big guys. They set the rules. But the 40, first of all, we started off with 40 recommendations. And you would remember this. You all would have gone through all of this stuff. They started off with 40 recommendations for money laundering. And then there were another 8 recommendations that they called special recommendations, which were geared towards terrorism financing. Then there was a 9, then it became 40 plus 9. And then in 2012, they revised the whole thing, came back to the table and said, you know what, we need to revise some things, we need to make some adjustments to some things. And they ended back up with 40 recommendations. And the truth about it is, I was so proud of myself some years ago when I knew all 40 recommendations. I could have just named 40. I knew all of them. Yeah. That's how I love this stuff. I knew all 40 recommendations. I knew all of the 8 special. And then they go and change them. Now there are 40 recommendations again. I know most of them. But the main point is, let us look at this from a standpoint that we need to understand how to apply this stuff to real life situations. And so, what do we look at? I want to share with you that financial institutions, people don't set up financial institutions for the purpose of being involved in criminal activity. I believe for the most part, when people set up financial institutions, for the most part, it's profit driven, it's for a good cause, and it is done by decent people. That's the general context. You agree with me on that? When people set up a bank or credit union or insurance company, it is usually with the intention of doing good business with good people and making a good profit. That's really what it boils down to. However, criminals look at those same institutions and they see opportunity to further their cause. They see opportunities to abuse the financial system, which was created to do good business. And so you have institutions which were set up for good purposes, then now being abused by criminals and then being looked at as bad folks. Invariably, people who work in financial institutions are usually decent people, regular folks like us. How many of you work in financial institutions proper? How many of you work in banks? Okay. Banks, insurance companies? Okay. Any other type of institution? Private banking, investment, credit union, regulation?
Gaming.
Gaming. Oh boy, we can talk about gaming.
No.
We have some fun with gaming. We have some fun with gaming because we have some views on gaming. We have some views on gaming. But the truth about it is, when you look at all of these financial institutions which were created, they were created for a good cause. However, you have some other folks who would have been involved in criminal activity and would have generated money from their criminal activity. Now, these people who generate monies from their criminal activity, they need to find somewhere to put their money. They don't listen to Grammy anymore, but putting it under the mattress or putting it, nobody does that anymore. Grammy's already died out and the money died with her. So nowadays, criminals need to find ways to get their money into the financial services system. And so what they do, they attempt as best as possible to get their money into the system so that it can look legitimate, so that no one will call them out on their criminal activity. And so we have this situation where people who have been involved in criminal activity will make every effort to try to get their monies into the financial system. And so they want to clean their money. Money was dirty. It came about as a result of dirty activity, and so they're attempting to clean it. They were involved in selling drugs, prostitution, this thing, the next thing, selling guns, whatever the criminal activity they were involved in, they got some proceeds from those monies. And so now, because these are church folks, because these people are deacons and deaconesses, they don't want their names smeared all over the place. And so they need to find some way to get their money into the system, to clean up the money. And so just as we send clothes to the laundry when they are dirty, these people find some means of laundering their money when it came from dirty sources. And so we have this whole business of money laundering. You are here because you are on your way to becoming, in a couple of days, you will become an anti-money laundering specialist. I was so hurt one day when I passed some course or something, and somehow the pastor got word of it, and he got up in church and he said, we want to congratulate Brother Thompson. Brother Thompson is now a money laundering expert. He didn't name it.
No.
But I had to put up my Baptist finger and say, no, not money laundering. And so people find ways to get their monies into the system. So you all would remember that this whole business of trying to get your money into the system, the first step that they call stage in the money laundering process, trying to get your money in that system, is called placement. You try to place your money in the system. You try to get your money somehow. Now that placement can happen in so many ways. You know somebody work in a credit union, you know somebody work in a financial institution, and you say to them, what amount can I put in the credit union without anybody being suspicious about anything?
Any amount. Any amount.
And then you start to ask some questions. Good afternoon. Take one of those. That's the last one. The lucky person, the last lucky one. And so they find out how they get their monies in there without arousing suspicion. But there are many ways that people place their monies inside a financial institution. One of the ways that they do that is to put their money in the system in such a way that nobody would be suspicious about it at all. And so you would remember some of the avenues for placing money. That is called placement. That's the first stage of money laundering. Then the second stage, once they get the money in there, then they start to move it around. They start to buy other vehicles. They start to do other things with it. They buy some shares here and there. They do this. They buy some stocks. They buy a vehicle here and there. They do a couple of other things with it. And then they perhaps start to open up other accounts. All of that is called the second stage, layering. They're trying to layer it. They're putting one on top of the other, or they, just moving it around. And then afterwards, they would watch it for a little while, see if they get any call from the authorities, police, nobody called them. They say, okay, this thing looks like it's working. And then what they do, they take some of that money out, and they start to get it back into the financial services sector, the real world. And so they may buy a piece of property, they may buy some shares, they may do some other things with it. They are integrating it back into the system. By the time they would have been integrating it back into the system, you are not able to trace that money with the criminal and his activity. So you have those three stages, and then, a person would have been successful in laundering their money. That's on the money laundering side. You have this other thing that you call terrorism financing. Now we know that no one ever thought of this whole business of financing terrorism until this whole 9/11 fiasco. In fact, the whole world has changed after 9/11. Somebody called me yesterday. The mechanic was doing some work, and he called and he said, "I'll be there in a little while." Then he called 2 hours later and said, "I'll be there in a little while." And then he called the third or fourth hour and said, "I'll be there in a little while." The short and long of it is that he ended up telling me that he was in a bank for 4 hours trying to open up one bank account. 4 hours, and he could not believe it. And the thing about it is, that was unheard of just a couple of years ago. I mean, the truth about it is, this whole 9/11 thing changed the whole world. It changed travel. I remember anybody remember when you used to love traveling? I'm not talking about the destination.
Yes,
You used to love saying you going on a plane and you looking at your ticket and you looking at what time you boarding and all that kind of stuff. But now, when somebody tells me I have to go somewhere, I'm angry. I think about all I have to go through in them long lines. And people treat me like a criminal, and when you have a name like Stephen Thompson. No, because somebody did something. Somebody went up the road with that name. Because every time I go for police record, that's a full day of fingerprinting. Yeah, go sit back over there. And then they call me back. They treat me like a regular criminal. And then they must have said something to the U.S. folks, because every time I travel, and they always call me for secondary. Always. And I don't know these people, and they don't know me. But my point is, the whole world has changed. All because some persons found some way to fund some fiasco that actually ended up being perhaps one of the most tragic things that has occurred in generations. But this whole business of terrorism financing, when we think about it, terrorism financing, how do you explain it? It's so difficult to put a finger on it. Because how many of you have bought Red Cross tickets, or tickets from the Red Cross? How many of you have gone to the Red Cross ball? All of you look rich, all of you have been. How many of you give donations to the Salvation Army? Good causes. How many of you go to the Ranfully home and say, "How much y'all need? Let me just write the check." How many of you just give money in a charitable manner? How often, if you do that, how often would you think that this money could be funding somebody over on the other side of the world who has a warped mind and don't mind killing little children or old folks, anybody, because of what they believe? And so you have this whole business of terrorism financing. In fact, as I said before, there were 19 special recommendations set up just for terrorism financing. And the thing about it is that these same recommendations have been entrusted, impressed upon your institutions today. Meaning that for us, we don't know anything about any terrorism. The Hammons, we ain't into no terrorism now. We buck our toe, and that's a major tragedy.
We can rob it, but
You ain't gonna find too many suicidal behaviors.
No,
And we ain't going.
we can rob it.
We ain't going. We just don't do stuff like that. We don't subscribe to stuff like that. But the thing about it is, we can do so. We can contribute to these things unknowingly. So that's how this whole thing came about. And so now we mentioned a few of the acronyms earlier. That's where you get this whole business of KYC. KYC, know your customer. There was a time when you could go into any institution, and as long as you had money, they just smiled with you and they took your money and they said, oh, please come back again. They took the money from you. If you had a passport on you, that was good.
That's fine.
If you didn't have a passport,
That's good.
say, oh, yeah, I know, ask her, she know me. And they took whatever amount of money from you. Nowadays, this whole thing called KYC says that you have to know the person you are building this relationship with. And so anybody was ever involved in the onboarding process, taking on new customers? Thank you. So you know, that's not what it used to be. A couple of years ago, you know, onboarding, you know, you chat up and say, yo, your face look familiar. Which way you go? Okay, that time you're giving them the money, they're taking the money. Oh, yeah, I'm going to take it. You been there when he preached for that thing?
Yeah, man.
You know, and then after that they walk, yeah, see you next week. And then they come and bring the same amount of money or more. You know. That's how we used to operate. Now, you have to know the true identity of the person. Anybody ever went to school with somebody and, you know, we always call her Mary. Let me see her. You see in the papers and she got some award or something like that. And you see Susan so-and-so. What is Susan? Mary. You went to school again, we always call her Mary. The decades we call her Mary. Oh, she got a mistake. There must be a typo. There should be Susan. And her document says Susan. But you would not have gone, and you would have known that, because if she had gone to the bank and she purported to be married, you would have taken her money as married. And so now, we have a requirement now to find out the true identity of people, true identity of a person. And so now we are going to what is called, or what I refer to as the two pillars, PILLARS, of this whole business of anti-money laundering. The first one is knowing the true identity of the customer, knowing the true identity, not assumed identity, knowing the true identity of the customer, which is backed up by some national identification document. And notice now, I mean, this thing of voter's card. Voter's card. I mean, they come a dime a dozen. If you want a voter's card, you could go right through the corner there. You could buy a voter's card. So you have to have a national identification document, and you have to determine what is the person's true identity. Once you know who the person really, really is, and not just on paper, you need to find out some other things about the person. Where does this person live? When I say live, not their residence. Where does this person live in society? What does this person do? Who do they hang out with? Because the old folks used to say a man is known by the company he keeps. So if you keep bad company, eventually you will, unless you're really good at persuading people, eventually you will become a bad person. And so now you're talking about determining who this person really is. And let us get some documents. And so we ask them some poignant questions, and they have to answer telling us who he or she really, really is. Once you know that, once you would have gotten that, once you would have secured those documents, that will be what you call the KYC, you're getting to know this customer or client. That's how you get to know people. Then after that, after you get that initial information, you will then have to continue to dig a little deeper about that person. And that is where you gather additional information on the person. They would have told you some things at the onboarding or initial process, and you will look to see how much of that is really panning out against what they say to you initially. And so you would do what you call customer due diligence, and that's an ongoing process. That means that this person say he or she works for government, and we know that unless you really, really senior in government, you really don't make too much money. And some of the senior, we are talking about legitimately so. I ain't talking about unless you really, really senior up there. When I say senior, you're talking about DPS and deputy appointment secretary. You don't really make money like that. Not from that job. But this person is coming in, making these large deposits, week after week, week after week, week after week. Then you start to dig a little deeper. That's what you call the customer due diligence. You're doing your due diligence on this person. You're finding out a little bit more about this person. She started off with an initial deposit of $1,000. Now he's bringing in $16,000. And then that's not bad because then you have to go through the stuff. But when you look, the person is bringing in 11 here, 9 the next week, 14 the next week, 8 the next week. And so never at the mandatory threshold of 50. And so you start to wonder, is this person really, really somebody who we want a relationship with? And then that begs the question, what is the source of this person's money? Where are they getting this money from? Where's the person getting this money from? And that's where you come to the second pillar. The first one is knowing the true identity of the person. The second one is knowing the source of their funds. Once you get those two, those are the two pillars. Everything that AML is built on those two pillars. How well do you know this person? Do you understand the legitimacy of their funds? Are the funds coming from legitimate sources? If a person tells you he or she is self-employed, if the person is an attorney, we know round about how much money attorneys make. Obviously, we know that some do better than others. But we know for the most part, we have a fairly good idea how much attorneys make. Attorneys in a firm are paid so much. Unless you're one of the partners or managing partner or something like that, you can figure out how much you make. And so if you're bringing in monies which are not consistent with that position, it's a red flag. If you're a school teacher, you know, they don't pay you. Poor things. But if they are bringing in large deposits, if you operate and I don't say this in a disparaging way, but if you have a store, let's call it a Chinese restaurant. And you work across the road from the Chinese restaurant. And you saw 3 people go in there for the whole day. But that afternoon, somebody deposits $11,000.
Human trafficking.
So we need to talk. We need to talk. We need to talk. This thing doesn't make sense. Something you told me up front is not panning out with what I'm seeing demonstrated on a daily basis. We need to talk. And so these are the kinds of things that you would have already been looking at over these couple of months. This whole business of AML. You wanted to do the share?
It's already closed.
Oh, I thought it meant if they twisted it. This whole business of anti-money laundering. Anti-money laundering. You need to know that firms Just do some more.
Come
But
on.
perhaps if you
Yeah.
flip it, it might.
Right, so it'll show you. That's fine.
Okay, this whole business of anti-money laundering, you need to understand that efforts need to be made. Efforts need to be made to what we call combat or fight or minimize the scourge of money laundering. Let me say to you, some of you may be disappointed in hearing this. As long as you are people in this world, you will always have money laundering. It's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. And the FATF understands that. But what they do, they try to put measures in place to try to minimize it, to try to curtail it. And that is why they have something that you call, anybody remember, typologies. That's why you have typologies. When you have a chance, if you haven't already done so, go to the Financial Intelligence Unit, the Egmont Group of FIUs. Egmont Group of FIUs. Go to the Egmont's website and look for the Egmont's typology. They usually produce, every couple of years, they will produce 100 typologies by sector. And so what the value of typologies is that they would show you how people laundered money in the past. Whether it was 10 years ago, 2 years ago, last week, yesterday, when you look at it, it will tell you the way people laundered money in the past. And it's good. It's a good measuring point to say, okay, this is the method they use. Well, okay. However, the downside of that is, by the time you're reading a typology, that means that the criminal know that it's produced and it's circulated, and so they move to something else. And let me say this to you: decent people like us, most of us work in the daytime and sleep in the night.
Criminals out at night.
Criminals don't sleep.
Not at all.
They don't sleep. They are devising strategy all the time. And so every time you clog one hole, they come up with something else. And that is why you would have the FATF recommendation always up for review. The CFATF's recommendation always up for review. And so your AML program is always subject to review because criminals are constantly changing. Every time you think you got this thing down pat, the criminals come up with something different and you say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. That didn't work. They still found. So remember now, these people who we are talking about, this is their full-time job. You have your full-time job, you put on nice clothes and you go to this place and you stay there and you give it your all. The criminals, this is their full-time job. How do I get my money in this place? Without any problem. And guess what? Sometimes that means that they will make some very unwise decisions.